I've always told this story as like a, wow, you want to hear this crazy thing that happened? But I've been thinking about it a bit more, and I'm starting to realize that I might have narrowly avoided something very bad. This happened 6 years ago when I was 12. At the time, I was a competitive dancer of 9 years and dancing 20 to 30 hours a week plus school. And during the summer, my dance studio went on a camp retreat together. It was only girls. There were 3 other girls my age and everyone else was older. The campsite we were at had those tents that are on wooden platforms and are really spacious on the inside with beds instead of sleeping bags. It was a packed campground, so there were lots of people around. Things started getting weird within a few hours of arriving. I was on dinner duty for the first night, so I didn't see what happened but was later told. While I was making dinner, a young man approached the girls who were out further in the campsite by the campfire and began saying things about their appearance. I don't remember everything that my friends told me that happened, but the 2 most important things were that he began approaching one of the girls aggressively and kept trying to get her to come with him. When she refused, he swore at her. He also grabbed a ton of our firewood and then disappeared. At this point, although this guy was creepy, he thought he was just a jerk playing a prank or something, so the girls didn't really talk about it too much, and anybody who was in the dinner group, including myself, didn't know about it yet. At this campsite, there was a giant cabin about a mile or 2 down the road with tables and basic games. So that night, we did a game night there. I don't remember what exactly we were playing, but it was some type of card game. In the middle of playing, the room suddenly got quiet and I was confused. But when I looked up, there was a young man standing in the doorway. It was the same young man from before, but at the time I didn't know. Only about half the girls knew who he was, and our teacher had no idea. He was holding a dog, and as an animal lover, I always loved to go pet dogs, but when I go up to walk over and say hi, my gut immediately dropped, and I immediately sat back down. I had no idea why I was so scared of him. Our teacher asked him what he was doing there, and he just said he wanted to say hi. We continued on with our game, but he stayed in the doorway for probably 10 minutes before he finally left. The next incident occurred the next day when we began noticing a truck driving by our campsite a lot, like multiple times an hour. It was the same guy as before. At this point, everybody in the camp knew who he was, including our teacher. Our teacher told us not to worry, that he's probably just friendly and just to make sure that we stayed in groups. That night we played games again in the cabin, and he walked through the cabin several times, but we ignored him. However, I and the 3 girls my age started to get tired at around 11, and we asked our teacher if we could walk back to the campsite together and go to bed. She told us that was fine, and so we left. That night it was pouring rain, so it was extra dark. We were a bit paranoid at this point, but I kept telling my friends we didn't have to worry since he probably just wanted friends, just like our teacher said. But we still looked over our shoulders the whole way. About halfway back to the campsite, we noticed a figure behind us, and it had the same gait as the guy. I will say, I don't think I'd ever run that fast. Like, I'm talking Usain Bolt level. We ran the whole way back to the campsite. When we got to the tent, we all tried to hide. I got lucky and found the best hiding spot, which was underneath the bed. The other girls weren't so lucky. I remember watching the tent flap, waiting for him to walk through. But then, being a stupid kid, I realized that my friends would be stuck with him while I was hiding, so I crawled out from under the bed. I remember grabbing something heavy to defend ourselves with, thinking I'd be able to take him on myself. I waited and waited, but he didn't come in. We all started whispering, trying to figure out what to do, and being stupid kids again, and thinking we're all just in the movies or something and anyone can survive anything. My friend decided to go outside to check if the coast was clear. Obviously, I went with her because I didn't want her to go alone. When we went outside on the edge of the platform, he was probably about 5 feet from us. He was facing away from us and scanning the campground. We watched him search the campground, and at one point I made what I thought was direct eye contact, but somehow he must have not seen me. Eventually he left, but we were scared to leave, so we waited for everyone to get back. I genuinely have no idea what he was doing. I have never seen someone and thought that I couldn't go near them, and I have no idea how he didn't see us or why he didn't go inside the tent. Was he really just looking for friends? Like I said in the beginning, I tell this story a lot, mostly joking, but it's always bothered me. I will never forget his face. I have no idea who he is or what his intentions were, but I do know that I've never been so scared in my life. If you have any ideas, let me know. Thanks for reading. I know I posted on here not long ago, but after a few hours straight of reading these stories, I'm eager to share another odd experience I had. So this happened last February. I was 14 and I'm a girl. I'm nearly 16 now. I was at a pier on the south coast of England with my friends, all guys older than me. We were hanging in front of one of the rides since two of my friends were waiting to go on a ride and we were going to watch. It was overcast and literally just one other family was here who were on the ride. I then noticed a girl. I noticed her because she's really pretty and I envy her. She's wearing a cool skirt with ripped tights and a stylish coat. She's kind of gothy, basically an e-girl. She looks to be in her late teens. Found out she was 17. She's with another guy in a tracksuit and they're standing on a platform for this ride, but it's shut. I don't think anything of it and I turn back to my friends. I notice out of the corner of my eye that she's now against the railing that goes around the platform, looking right at me. She does that a few times while talking to the guy she's with. I continue talking with my friends until their gaze looks ahead of me and I turn and see her approaching me. Hey, I really love your style. I love your hair, your eyes, your necklace, everything. Where'd you get your jacket from? I feel so flattered that this girl thinks I'm pretty. I say, thank you so much. I'm not sure where this jacket's from since I got it in a charity shop. Like a thrift store. I'm wearing a green baseball jacket, but I'm just so honored this really pretty girl is saying this to me. Then she asks, you don't happen to be interested in girls? One half of me says, no, she's much older and much prettier. She can't possibly like you. The other half says, say yes, I'm curious about her and want to see where this goes. I decide to say, yeah, I'm kind of curious. She said, great, can I have your number? I should say no, that's sensible, but I'm intrigued. I wonder what she's like. So I give her my number and they head out. A couple of my friends said they saw them further down the pier, and she asked them for spare money for rides. It's kind of strange, but we didn't think anything of it. As the day goes on, my friends and I head back to one of their houses and catch a bus. I and the girl exchange a few messages. I say thank you for the compliments and stuff, and think she has a cool style, and I get her Instagram. This is where I thought things were kind of odd. There are several posts on there of her at a really posh hotel, and she's all dressed up with a guy who I make out as her boyfriend. All her posts were laid out like an Instagram model's or like a celebrity's. Why is she talking to a 14-year-old girl? But anyways, we talk for not even 12 hours on and off on Instagram and the conversation dies. So she just disappears and becomes just an inside joke between me and my friends, and I delete her contact. A couple months pass and a post comes up. It's her and this dude who looks straight off the cover of a magazine. It's kinda odd. You don't come across people looking like that in England often. Anyways, I don't think much of it. It is what it is. The post has some cheesy quote at the bottom, so I assume they are together or something. 2 months later, I'm in my room at around 11 p.m. and I have a missed call on my phone. It's not from any of my contacts, so I just leave it. There was no voicemail. 30 minutes later, I get a text. Hey, it's me. You can guess it, sir. Please ring me. I'm heartbroken. I don't call her. I say I can't anyway since it's late. I have thin walls and I don't want to disturb my dad. She doesn't go into detail about what happened. I guess it was with Mr. Magazine dude. The next day, she urges me to come over to see her so we can drink wine and so she can take pictures of me for her Depop, an app where you sell clothes and stuff. At that point, I blocked her. I felt bad, but it felt off. I look nothing like the people on her Instagram. Plus, I'm 3 years younger. What does she want? I'm curious, but I'm not taking it that far. I noticed although I had blocked her, my phone would tell me what messages she sent after I blocked her. They were long and they were angry. One sentence said, I had big plans for you. Take into consideration, we had literally only, 4 conversations? What plans? She doesn't even know me. At closer inspection, my friend found that in one of her posts, it was a video of her in a bikini dancing by a pool. He highly suspects the marks on her legs are track marks from using drugs. I do feel bad for this girl. I have no idea what was going on. I wish I knew. I'm a very curious person, but who knows? I walk to most places because being severely visually impaired, I obviously can't drive. I walk at night during summer, which lasts anywhere from April to October if we're lucky. This is probably not the safest area, but I am from Texas, so temperatures of 100 degrees aren't unusual. One of my usual destinations was a convenience store a few blocks from my previous house. I set out one normal night to get myself some Pepsi and a candy stash. Our town isn't very big and most people drive everywhere. It's very unusual to come across anyone else on my route to the store, but that night a man appeared out of nowhere and started talking like he knew me. He asked me where I was going and I told him. It wasn't unusual for people to keep watch on me because I am a hard of hearing blind girl with 4-arm crutches. This guy had no reason to be there and was walking way too close beside me. He asked me where I was going and I told him, just in case I was overreacting. I sped up as much as I could since this part of the route is very dark with only a subway that had closed for the night. He definitely wasn't there for a $5 footlong. I tried to appear calm, though the alarm bells were ringing and I was shaking to the point I was afraid I'd drop a crutch, which was probably about the worst thing that could happen right then. Especially after he started asking what I liked in the bedroom and he could easily have his way with me in the ditch and nobody would know. I felt sick but continued my walk. The store was only about 20 yards away. I knew the guy was on the graveyard shift. I got safely inside and my friend handed me a bag to carry my stuff in until I was ready to check out. When I got up to the register, he began speaking loudly enough that my ears hurt and I had to turn my hearing aids down because it hurt. "Hey sweets, did you find my 3DS? I played along and he opened the half-door thing and I sat on the stool like it was normal. Creepy dude came over and slammed his Bud Light and a 10 on the counter. After being handed his change, he went outside. He's still out there by the ice machine. After about 20 minutes, he still hadn't left. My friend called his manager and after explaining the situation, she told him to lock up and run me home. He did and even walked me to my door. I put the key in the door and we stepped inside. Catherine said to give you this. He handed me a keychain and showed me how to flick and unlock the pepper spray. Call us before you come from now on. He's coming after you for the last 4 weeks. He left and I made sure every door and window was locked. So, when I was 19 female, I was trying to figure out if something was wrong with me. I was living with a bunch of roommates, working to have a place to sleep, and to party pretty much. I decided to go to rehab after having a mental breakdown after a shroom trip. I go into an all-women's place 4 hours from home and lasted one night. I was told it wasn't religious, though they did encourage you to find something higher than you to believe in. So even though I'm in the Bible Belt, I took a chance and was thinking maybe I learned some more about religion maybe. They ended up being highly religious, multiple mandatory Bible studies a day, praying a lot, and church multiple days a week. And when I wanted to leave after a night of no sleep, they didn't believe in any medicine, including mental health meds or melatonin. They locked me, no joke, in a tiny church with tiny pews they had in some back room until I figured out what I was doing. I had religious trauma and other trauma, and I just wasn't as big an addict as I thought. So yeah, I realized I needed therapy, not a 9-month rehab program. So I called the numbers I had written down, and no one in my family was willing to come get me. My mom told me to hitchhike. The rehab gave me $20 and dropped me at a gas station, the protocol when somebody wanted to leave and didn't have a ride. Okay, so I was pretty much sitting on the sidewalk out front, crying for a few hours. People asked me if I needed a ride, and I wasn't surprised how many people didn't want to do that. I mean, it's 4 hours. I'd use people's phones to call my little sister every once in a while to let her know I was alive. I asked one older man, and when I got off the phone, he asked me why I was out here. I made up a story about my boyfriend leaving me there on the way to see his parents, not wanting to talk rehab with strangers. He offered to give me a ride, and it was getting closer tonight, and I was getting desperate, so I ended up going with him. I text my sister off his phone and tell her what's happening yet. I put my location in his GPS. When I ask why we turned the wrong way, he tells me he just bought groceries and it's milk, so we have to go back to his house first, and I agree because the man just offered to drive me 4 hours. We go to his house, which is a little house amongst a bunch of fields, and he ends up offering me some weed. I accepted because by the time we get back to his house, I'm sure this is where I die. I end up getting pretty paranoid and think he's poisoning me through the air vents when I smell something weird, but I just keep smiling and trying to stay calm, not letting him know I'm considering tucking and rolling out. I call my sister multiple times in the car, letting her know that we are by the street signs and keeping an eye on the GPS. His daughter calls because he was apparently supposed to be seeing his grandkid that day, and I tell her my full name and where we're going. In between this, the man is telling me how many people go hitchhiking and end up dead. Like telling me a lot of these stories. I just nod along and smile. He's getting more agitated by the hour and making me more and more paranoid that the end of this drive or some wrong turn along the way is where he's going to kill me or worse. I'm freaking out every time he takes a turn that's slightly off from the GPS, and he'd tell me it's a shortcut. Well, when we finally get there, I don't want him knowing my parents' exact address. I had just put my town in the GPS, so I have him stop at the end of the street. I tell him my mom's a raging alcoholic, which, I mean, she is, lol. And he's better off just stopping here because she's crazy. He takes a picture of me before I get out, and I don't look back when I start walking down the street. So, do you think I was almost murdered and kept enough of an eye on everything he was doing that he didn't think it was worth it? Or do you think this was a sweet old man doing me a favor and I was just acting like a nutcase the whole time? This was 6 years ago. I've forgotten some of the details, honestly, but I've never been more scared in my whole life. I hope it was all innocent, but let's never meet again if you're reading this, dude. A few weeks ago, I was driving in the middle of nowhere, heading to one of my friends. My wife was sleeping next to me while my teenage daughters were watching a movie in the back. Next to them, my toddler was playing with his toys. It was around 1 a.m. and I was nervous as the drive there seemed to last forever. The dirt road with no lights gave me chills as all I could see around were only fields. The road had many holes and I was trying to avoid them as much as I could. I was very focused on that when I saw in the front of the car some luggage. It was in the middle of the road on my side. On the other side, a car was parked facing us. The car was completely in the dark, so there were no lights inside or outside of it. I didn't want to drive over the luggage, so my first instinct was to go out and move it. I was lucky to have my wife with me. She grabbed my hand and pointed to something on the right. One person was in the field, looking sometimes at his phone. The reason my wife saw him in the first place. I turned my car around and I was ready to leave this road when two people jumped in front of us from the field. There was no space on the road, so I couldn't go without harming them. Two people were in front of my car. One piece of luggage, a car, and the person checking their phone in the field were behind us. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing that I thought of. I just turned around again facing the luggage and just drove over it. Fortunately, there was nothing inside it to damage my car, so we got out of this station completely unharmed. We arrived at my friend's house and everything was perfect and we had a great time there. However, I still have chills when I'm thinking about this incident. So, people from that field, let's not meet again. This happened at the beginning of this year, and I still think about it from time to time because I genuinely have no explanation for it. For some context, I'm Brazilian, and at the time, I was working remotely for a US company. They were flying the whole team to Los Angeles for an offsite, and my itinerary included a connection in Lima, Peru. On the flight, I was seated next to an elderly man and an elderly woman. I assumed they were married because they were traveling together and looked around the same age. I usually keep to myself on flights, but shortly after takeoff, the man asked if I could help him connect to the plane's Wi-Fi. I'm the type of person who has a hard time saying no when somebody needs help, so of course I said yes. While filling out the registration form, I learned a couple of things about him. He introduced himself as Cornelius Peter, followed by a very European-sounding last name that I unfortunately can't remember. When the form asked where he was from, he told me Bolivia. Since I'm Brazilian and can speak a decent amount of Spanish, I switched from English to Spanish to make things easier. However, they both looked at me with completely blank expressions. They clearly didn't understand me. I immediately thought, wow, maybe my Spanish is way worse than I thought, which surprised me because Portuguese and Spanish are so similar. So I switched back to English and continued helping him. When we got to the payment screen, he told me he didn't have a credit card. I explained that he would need one to purchase Wi-Fi access, so that was the end of that interaction, or at least I thought. A little while later, they started talking quietly to each other. It definitely wasn't Spanish. I had absolutely no idea what language it was, but it sounded distinctly European, at least to my ears. That immediately struck me as odd. A man who said he was from Bolivia who didn't seem to understand Spanish, speaking what sounded like a European language. Of course, immigration exists, and there are communities all over the world, so I didn't jump to any conclusions. I just found it unusual. Then I started paying more attention. I noticed the man had 3 badly rotten teeth in his mouth, while the woman was also missing several teeth. She wore a long dress with a headscarf that reminded me of traditional rural clothing, almost like something you'd expect from an isolated farming community. Meanwhile, the man was dressed in fairly modern clothes, but kept wearing a baseball cap throughout the entire overnight flight, which seemed a little bit unusual. Then I noticed something that confused me even more. At one point, he pulled his passport out of his jacket. It was Mexican. So now I had this. A man who told me he was from Bolivia, who didn't seem to understand Spanish, who spoke what sounded like a European language, and was carrying a Mexican passport. I had absolutely no idea what to make of that combination. Then I noticed him repeatedly opening the Compass app on his phone, staring at it for a few seconds and taking screenshots of it, over and over. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for that, but it felt incredibly strange in the moment. Around this time, the woman tried speaking to me in her language. I politely smiled but ended the interaction because by then, I wasn't feeling comfortable anymore. That's when I started getting a really bad gut feeling. I've only experienced that kind of instinct a handful of times in my life. At one point, I'm fairly certain I saw him raise his phone in my direction. As I said, I'd watched him repeatedly open the Compass app and take screenshots, so it's entirely possible that's all he was doing again. But this time the phone was clearly pointed toward me, and for a split second, I thought he'd just taken a picture of me. To this day, I honestly don't know if he actually did, or if I simply misinterpreted what I saw because I was already on edge. Either way, it made me feel even more uncomfortable. Maybe he was just looking in my direction. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But combined with everything else, it made me incredibly uncomfortable. From that point on, I couldn't relax at all. It was an overnight flight, but I didn't sleep for a single minute. Eventually, I got up to use the bathroom, and as I was walking back to my seat, the woman happened to be walking toward me. I know this is probably the weirdest part of my story, and I'm not saying I'm proud of it, but my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right, so I took a quick photo of her. Not because I thought she committed a crime or anything like that, but because if the situation somehow escalated, I wanted to be able to send the pictures to my husband so somebody would know who I'd been sitting next to. She definitely noticed and gave me a very uncomfortable look afterward. When I got back to my seat, I also managed to discreetly take a photo of the man for the same reason. Maybe it was irrational, but I was traveling alone through another country and I wasn't taking any chances. Then something happened that made me even more uneasy. My handbag had been under the seat in front of me the whole flight, but when I returned, it looked like it had been moved. Maybe I was imagining this. Maybe someone accidentally bumped it. I honestly don't know, but I immediately searched through everything. First, I checked that my passport was still there. Then I went through every pocket to make sure nothing had been slipped into my bag. Thankfully, everything was exactly where I left it. The woman started acting even stranger. She spent long periods whispering prayers, looking visibly distressed, almost like she was in pain or suffering. Every so often, she'd whisper something to the man. Sometimes, she would lean forward in her seat, which gave him a completely unobstructed view of me. And every single time I happened to glance in his direction, he was looking directly at me. Not glancing and not looking around the cabin, just staring. When we landed in Lima, we deplaned onto buses instead of directly into the terminal. The second the aircraft door opened, I practically bolted off the plane so they wouldn't be anywhere near me while boarding the bus. Only after I reached my next gate and knew I was safe did I tell my husband and a few close friends everything that had happened. One of them suggested that they might have been drug mules or involved in some kind of smuggling operation, and became very nervous when I seemed to be paying attention to them. Another friend thought maybe they belonged to some isolated immigrant community that would explain the language and appearance. Honestly, I have no idea. Before anybody says it, I know that every individual thing I described could have been perfectly innocent. I mean, people speak different languages and elderly people behave in unusual ways sometimes. None of those things are suspicious on their own. What unsettled me was the combination of all those little details together, plus a gut feeling that I've only experienced a few times in my life. Maybe I was just an anxious woman traveling alone. Maybe my brain connected a bunch of unrelated things into a scary story. Or just maybe there really was something off about the situation. Genuinely don't know. Has anyone ever experienced something familiar on an international flight? Or does anyone have a theory that could explain all of this? Update. Thanks to a commenter, I think we may have actually solved this mystery. There are Prussian Mennonite communities in Bolivia, and some members of these groups hold Mexican passports. Cornelius Peter is also a very common name within those communities. They are primarily found around Santa Cruz, which, now that I think about it, was exactly the city he mentioned when we were filling the form. Given how isolated some of these communities are, it would also make sense that they may not be fluent in Spanish and could behave in ways that felt unusual or hard for me to interpret in the moment. So that explanation actually fits a lot of what I experienced. Mystery solved? Hi Reddit. This is the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, and it happened a day after I stumbled upon this subreddit. Also, I created this account only to post this. It was a Friday morning, the day before school ended for me, and I decided that, just for the heck of it, I would stay up until about 3 o'clock on Reddit. The last subreddit I was on before going to sleep was this one. I woke up feeling strange, about 5 minutes before it happened. My 8-year-old sister was asleep, and both my parents were running errands. I get out of bed and brush my teeth. Right as I finish, the doorbell rings. I go downstairs and open the door only to find this small Indian kid, no older than 6 years old, with a demented look on his face. He has 2 little toys, one in each hand. I ask him what was wrong, but instead he just tries to push past me into the house. I gently nudge him back outside, but he keeps trying to come in, so not knowing what to do, I just close the door on him. The doorbell starts ringing again. I ignore it for a few minutes, but it keeps ringing, so I open the door once again. The second the door opens, the kid sprints into the house past me. He sits himself down in the kitchen and starts playing with the 2 toys he brought. I have no idea what the heck I was supposed to do in this situation, so I just called the police. While I waited for them to come, the kid was wandering around my house, turning light switches on and off, unlocking and relocking various doors, and wandering into various rooms. The police finally came. This woke my sister up. They struggled to get the kid into their car to take him back to the station and find his parents. The police found the parents and got informed that the kid is extremely autistic and that he snuck out of his house before. Okay, whatever. I told my parents about it. They talked to his parents. His parents were nice and everything was taken care of. LOL, no. I went to bed at around 11, only to wake up due to a nightmare about that kid. That and my brain was telling me that it was piss time, so I get out of bed and walk into the hallway. At the end of the dark hallway, I see the Indian kid walk up the stairs with the same exact toys in his hand. The second he sees me, he makes a strange moaning noise. I thought I saw him drop something and he runs back downstairs. I hear the front door close, and after waiting about 5 minutes, I run downstairs, lock the door, run back up, and realize I pissed myself. When I awoke my parents and told them what happened, they said it was all just a bad dream. In the morning, the phone rings, and when I pick it up, the parents of the little Indian kid say that he wants to talk to me. He gets on the phone. It's the first time I've ever heard him say anything to anyone. He asks me for the toy truck that he dropped last night. Everything creepy always happens in Florida. It was the fall of 2007 and I was 15 living in New York. I was a competitive athlete in high school, the type who got up before school for workouts and trained for long hours after. With recruiting season a year away, I was under tremendous pressure to perform in my sport, as well as in the classroom. I was struggling to keep up in calculus at the time, so my mom suggested that I get a tutor. She made an appointment with a teacher friend of hers who really knew his stuff. I've been going to him regularly, probably 3 times a week for a month, before I met Alex. Alex had the tutoring session after mine, and we would cross paths every week. It had never been more than a glance and a smile, as I was incredibly shy and terrified of boys. He was quite tall and blonde with piercing blue eyes, so naturally I thought he was cute. One day, my tutor had to change his schedule and decided to book us together as we were learning the same topics in Calvin. I was shocked and delighted when Alex started chatting with me afterwards and asked for my phone number. I had never had a boy pay attention to me in that way, and I was flattered that someone cute wanted my number. Eventually, Alex and I began dating. Alex went to a Catholic school in another town, but because he lived in the same town as I did, he took the bus every morning from my school to his. This gave us most mornings together, and he was able to meet my friends. I was a little taken aback when they didn't take to him like I did. They mentioned him seeming weird, and I got super defensive but let it go. I realized that I'd been spending less time with them than I normally did, and assumed they were just jealous that I had a boyfriend. As time went on, things got more serious. We started doing things, and that's when things began to change. While Alex and I always talked regularly, he started getting over the top about staying in contact with me. He would make me stay on the phone with him all hours of the night, until eventually my mom started taking my phone before I went to sleep. This relationship also started taking a toll on my athletic career. I was too tired to spend my extra time training and started skipping my practices to see him, driving 30 minutes each way to his school. Eventually, my friends sat me down and told me how unhealthy this relationship had become. I had isolated myself from them, and my entire free time was spent with him. At this point, I wanted so badly to end the relationship. I had fallen out of love with Alex, and college applications were approaching. I had been scouted by no less than 10 colleges, and my plan was to attend Brown, my dream school. Alex's obsession with our relationship had taken a huge toll on his grades as well, and Brown wasn't going to be an option for him. I remember when I told him that was where I was planning on going, and he freaked out, saying he would never get in there and begging me not to go. At the time, I was also recruited by the University of Illinois. Alex applied there in hopes that I would ditch Brown and go to Illinois with him. That was the final straw for me. I ended things for good with Alex, assuming that would be it. Because he would take the bus from my school to his every morning, I still had to see him. I remember walking into school past him and his classmates who took the bus with him, and some of his guy friends yelled slut and whore at me. Apparently, he had spread a rumor that I had cheated on him with a bunch of guys, and then ended it with him. I ignored it until I started getting Facebook messages from random people at his school. I spent months getting nasty messages from guys at his school, accusing me of having STDs and telling me I was going to get gangbanged by his friends. Eventually, I had to delete my Facebook because it wouldn't stop. I think deleting my Facebook was what set off the stalker tendencies for Alex. He wasn't able to see my face online, so he started calling non-stop and sending desperate IM messages telling me he loves me. While this was going on, I was the favorite to win the high school championship in my sport. I'd gone undefeated all season. Alex ended up showing up while I was competing for the championship, and I saw him there. It shook me so badly I ended up losing the title. I was furious and heartbroken. I ended up picking up his call that came that night and screamed at him, telling him to never contact me again. That's when the threats began. I got a call a few nights later from Alex after he texted me. He had something important to tell me. Stupidly, I answered. He began to tell me how he was going to kill me, that he was going to show up at my parents' house when they were at work with a rope and a knife and make me suffer like I'd done to him. I started to cry, and he eventually went on to say that he was going to get me before I went into school because he knew exactly where I parked every morning and my parents were never going to find me. At this point, I had decided to record what was being said and had it taped on my phone. I hung up once I felt he said enough. The next morning, I went into school extra early, much earlier than I figured he'd be there. Showed the advisor my recording, who then called my mom. I remember feeling like a deep-rooted shame as my mom listened to the recording, like I had done something to bring this on myself. My advisor was so alarmed by the recording, he advised me to go to the police. This day still feels surreal to me. My mom and I sat in the police station all day explaining the story of my relationship with Alex and how it got to this point. The police then drove to his high school and arrested him while he was in class. The topper on the day, though, was when I went out to bring food back to the police station for my mom and I pulled into the station at the same time as the car holding Alex did. Saw him in cuffs, and he indeed looked like he wanted to kill me. Post-arrest, I got a restraining order against Alex, and he was sent to a mental health institution for a short while. He ended up breaking the RO on more than one occasion. I contacted the police, but they didn't think it was cause to do anything. I think it's important to note that Alex's family was wealthy and had a huge name in the area, so it wouldn't have surprised me if that's why they brushed it under the rug. I ended up attending Brown and had to inform them of the RO and let them know that Alex should not be allowed on campus. It's been over 10 years since this happened, and I still continue to receive friend requests and phone calls from him on occasion. I recently moved across the country from where this occurred. I finally feel safe now that I am far away from where he lives, but anytime I get a blocked call or text from a number I don't know, thought goes through my head that it's him. It's safe to say that this experience has completely changed who I let into my life and who I choose to date. Alex, let's not meet again. So, this happened April 7th, 2022, after the OR concert in Vancouver. I, 19 female at the time, went to the OR concert with my friend, 21 female at the time. We arrived together but left separately as we were taking different transit routes home. When the concert ended, my friend went to get merch and I went to the massive lineup for the bus outside the venue. This is when an older man approached me and began a conversation with me. He told me how he had come from the island just for the concert because he is such a big fan and he was staying at a hotel downtown for the night. Blah 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 blah. I was very dismissive of him because I didn't want to engage with him. Thankfully, my friend came out for a few minutes to wait with me for my bus while her bus came. During this time, he left me alone and began talking to other girls in the line about the concert and how much he loves OR. When my friend's bus came, she left me alone again. This is when the man approached me again and asked me if I wanted to go wait with him at the other bus stop, as it will probably be less busy, and we would actually get seats on the bus. I politely declined and went on my phone. When the bus finally came, we were stuck standing next to each other and I could feel his stare on me the whole time. Yet he talked to other random young girls about the concert. A few stops later, the bus was less crowded and I overheard two women speaking Spanish. Spanish is my native tongue, so I built up the courage to casually talk to them and let them know that I was worried about this man because he was making me uncomfortable. They noticed how he was watching me despite talking to other girls, and they noticed how weird he looked. They felt the same discomfort that I felt. These two lovely women were mother and daughter who were also staying at a hotel downtown. They told me to stay with them until we had to part ways. Finally, we arrived at the bus stop within the train station. Here, there are two platforms. The top one goes south, while the bottom one goes north. The ladies and I were going north, while the man walked towards the south side one. At this point, I thought maybe I'd overreacted, and he wasn't even following me at all. However, a minute later, I watched him come down the escalator. He watched me and the ladies. He lingered nearby, but not close enough to where it was obvious. His gaze remained locked on me. I knew then I had to act fast because the ladies and I would be getting off at different stops, and the one that I would get off at was farther away and more secluded. So much ran through my mind as the breeze of the subway filled the tunnel. I made eye contact with him as the train came to a stop and the doors opened. He did not go in right away. I stepped into the train with the ladies, and once he saw I had gone inside, he did too through a separate entrance. He entered without losing sight of me. He stood down the hall of the train with his eyes locked on me. If I stayed in this train a second longer, I knew it would be harder to escape. So when the bell chimed a warning that the train doors were about to shut, I ran out just in time so that by the time he realized I had gotten out, it was too late for him to exit the train too. I stood on the platform, unable to breathe as I watched the train slowly drive away. Through the window, he watched me with an angry look. Through the window, his eyes had gone wild as they stared me down, moving alongside the train. Thankfully, I made it home safe that night. I posted on Twitter about it, trying to find the women who helped me so I could thank them. Without them, I don't know what would have happened during that short time between the bus and the train. I never got the chance to thank them, but I hope they know their impact that night. To the man who tried following me, let's not meet again. Sorry, the title might sort of give it away, but I didn't know how else to word it. Okay, so one night, maybe almost a year ago, I was waiting for my boyfriend outside of the liquor store. I was waiting in the car and it was pretty much dark outside. This girl comes up to the car and I hear her say, "Angela?" It caught me off guard as I couldn't really see her, so I don't know how she recognized me. Anyways, I opened the door slightly because I thought maybe she was somebody I knew. I didn't recognize her at all. She made casual conversation with me. Small talk. Seemed fairly normal. I was very confused, but thought maybe it was someone I had met at a party that I didn't remember. About a week later, I got a bunch of weird messages on Instagram. They made no sense. She either sounded tweaked out or paranoid schizophrenic. I went to the profile and looked at the pictures, and it was the same girl. She was typing nonsense. I mean literal nonsense. paranoid, delusional thoughts that made no sense whatsoever. I brushed it off, whatever, but was still weirded out. A few months later, I see her in line at my work. I have no idea how she knew I worked there. I work at a restaurant similar to Chipotle, and as I was at the start of where people order, when she got to the front of the line, she said, "Hey, what time are you off?" And I said later, and didn't give her an exact time, obviously. She said okay and just walked away. Didn't order anything, so I know she was there to see me. Once again, I don't know how she knew I worked there because I don't put my work on social media. Anyways, after this encounter, I went on my break to check my phone and I had received Instagram messages from her. She was saying things like, "I was going to beat your ass," and all of this threatening, delusional stuff. I told my manager and he said he would walk me out to my Uber at the end of the night, which he did. I blocked the Instagram account, didn't hear from her or even about her for a while, until a few months ago. I saw in the police report from my city that she had been arrested for attempted murder. She had attempted to push 2 high school cross-country runners over a bridge. It's a bridge very close to my house that I often cross while walking home from work. It freaked me out. Since she had a slight obsession with me, I thought, wow, what if it had been me, walking that bridge since I take that route so much? Luckily, the kids fought her off and she was arrested and booked on attempted murder. I don't know how long she will be in there. This is California and I don't know much about sentencing when it comes to that. Anyways, I just thought I'd share it because it kind of creeped me out. Good Wednesday, everyone. Good job. We made it halfway through the week. Far from Monday, but not close to Friday. Forgive me for being a glass half empty kind of girl, but I'm only using the material I've been given. I've never been a Redditor and never even used this sub before, so I apologize if this isn't formatted to what you're used to. After reading some of the posts in here, I think this is probably the place to put it. I'm 34 female and unmarried, which means I occasionally get the pleasure of watching my niece and nephew while my sister and brother-in-law go on their bi-weekly date nights. This has been going on for the past 2 months. I previously didn't have much contact with her and her family, for one reason or another, but in my efforts to become the cool aunt, I've been trying to get to know my niece and nephew a little bit better, 8 years old and 11, respectively. My nephew has been into skateboarding lately, so I got him a new board for no other reason than that. He pestered me to take him to the skate park to try it out. I told him that was okay, but he had to stay within earshot of me. The reason behind this was because when I was growing up, that area was really scummy. It's improved astronomically over the past decade, but what can I say? I have trust issues. I watched him like a hawk while he rode on his new skateboard. My niece was sitting next to me playing with the naked-ass Barbie that I brought her. Clothed, but at least she wasn't playing with an iPad. I was timing my nephew. I didn't really want to stay more than an hour, but when I saw he was having fun, I periodically extended the time. As the sun was about to go down, I went ahead and called it back over. My niece decided it was time to go to the bathroom. I, of course, not knowing how to be an adult around children, told her to wait until we got through 45 minutes of traffic, hit the freeway, and drove 8 more miles to my house. I know, my dumbass did the math and decided it was wrong, so I took her to the public bathroom near the parking lot. My nephew went into the men's room, while I went ahead and took my niece into the ladies' room. The bathroom by itself is enough of a creepy encounter. Gang graffiti, satanic symbols, whole rolls of toilet paper casually sitting in the toilet bowl, and cracked mirrors. Spoiler, she didn't have to go after seeing the bathroom. I still made her wash her hands as if she were rolling around in toxic waste. As she and I exit the bathroom, I see my nephew shooting the shit with an older man. Yes, man. He had moved significantly away from the bathroom, and I had to do a light jog while dragging an 8-year-old by the hand. As I'm trotting with my 8-year-old luggage, I can clearly hear the man say, "Yeah, I remember your dad. We went to school together. Why don't you give me your number so we can all catch up?" Bro. First of all, I was a year ahead of my brother-in-law in school. Don't remember some creepy late 40s guy in either of our grades. Second, just what? I couldn't have heard that right. I got between them and told him to get away from my nephew. I also told my nephew that it was time for us to go home and to get in the car. The guy said he was just talking to him. I impolitely told him that if he went near either of them again, his genitalia would be rolling around my purse near my lipstick. I know that sounds harsh, but I didn't care. Quite honestly, I actually think I underreacted. This man, I swear, actually had the audacity to ask me if I had a teen pregnancy for having kids that age. Then also told me that I looked too pretty to have 2 kids. Then asked me my name and how old I was. I'm like, okay, you struck out with my nephew, now you want to take a run at me. I got in the car and stayed put with the engine on to see if I could see what vehicle he was in to grab the license plate. After a few minutes, I just drove off because I wanted the 2 kids to be away from the whole thing. I didn't want to frighten them. Through 4 years in the military and 6 years as a sheriff's deputy, I have learned that almost nobody can truly be trusted. The trauma that I faced in my own lifetime was enough to make me resilient. Heck, I still carry decoy money in my wallet and keep the rest in my bra. I still carry a pistol and there's almost always a knife in my belt. I told my sister and brother-in-law about the guy and they followed the police report. In my own opinion, the report didn't seem very thorough. They also said they would have a talk with my nephew, which I offered to be there for, but apparently my views cannot be articulated correctly for a child, which I guess I understand. Anyways, I just hope this guy is looked into and something is done. At least an investigation. At this point, I can only hold out hope. This happened many years ago when I female was 15. I lived in a small Midwestern town that had very little crime and I always felt safe even at night. I lived just a few blocks from downtown and would often walk or ride my bike there to pick up a soda, some candy, or on this particular evening, a pack of cigarettes. I know I was way too young to be smoking, but there it is. So I get my cigarettes and start walking back home. By this time it is starting to get dark, yeah, but that doesn't bother me. That is, until I pass across the street, and a guy steps out from the shadows and starts following me. Even then, I wasn't scared, just aware he was walking behind me and getting closer. I sped up a little bit and so did he. Pretty soon, this guy is like 3 or 4 stops behind me and he asks me for a cigarette. Being a dumb kid who was raised to be polite, I give him one. Then he asks for a light and I give him that too. Then I rapidly start walking away because this guy is starting to give me the creeps. He had long greasy hair and the way that he looked at me made me feel very uncomfortable. It was like he was looking at his dinner plate and deciding what to eat first. So I'm skedaddling up the street, which is now going up a big hill, when I hear the guy's footsteps starting to run towards me. I was already slightly out of breath from fast walking up this hill, and I know I'll never be able to outrun this guy, so I just keep on walking and hope the guy will jog right past me. Nope. Next thing I know, the guy has grabbed me from behind with one arm around my waist, pinning both arms to my sides and the other around my neck. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was mad, like how dare he. I realized that we were on a residential street, so I tell the guy that I'm going to start screaming my head off while I begin stomping on his feet as hard as I can. He hesitates for a moment, then lets me go and jogs further up the hill, disappearing behind a bush at the top. I crossed the street to walk on the opposite side of the bushes he went behind, and keep my eyes locked on those bushes all the way down the block. By now, I am only another block from home, and I break into a sprint and dash home. Of course, I never told my parents about what happened because I was afraid of getting in trouble for smoking and that they wouldn't believe me. Turns out that several weeks later, this guy grabbed another girl and beat and raped her. I didn't find this out until years later when I saw his picture in the paper for being on trial. I think I was his first attempt, and he got scared when I fought back. I'm so thankful that it was the fight response that kicked in for me that night, and not the freeze one. I was very, very lucky. Edited to add that I had been through a lot of trauma in my childhood and had used the coping mechanism of dissociation to protect my psyche from the trauma. I buried this event the same way and spent years in therapy working through my guilt over never telling. I'm shocked and dismayed at the negative reactions this story is getting, just because I didn't know how to react to a traumatic experience as a child. Maybe some of you should try empathy instead of judgment. This story happened to me, 35 female, about 4 years ago. But I've been listening to a podcast lately that talks about creepy encounters, and they mentioned this sub. I thought maybe my story fits here. About 4 summers ago, I was driving home from a friend's house by myself. Despite it being after midnight, the night was still really warm, and I had all of my windows down, welcoming the fresh air. I live in a decently sized suburb, around 100,000 people, of a big city, and while some areas are busy and modern, other areas feel way more like a rural small town. For example, 1 block down from a main highway is a back road that cuts through big farmlands. It's a good road to take when the highway is backed up with traffic, but driving it at nighttime is always a bit sketchy. The road has 2 narrow lanes with deep ditches on either side that I've seen many cars end up in, and the road is a bit windy as it parallels the dike in some areas. To top it all off, there are virtually no streetlights on the road, except for one streetlight right near the dike's entrance. So needless to say, because this road is a bit precarious, I was taking my time driving, enjoying the quiet night. I don't drive with music on if I'm really trying to focus, with the warm wind in my hair. As I am taking a very sharp corner, I hear, "Stop! Help!" from outside. I immediately slow down, put my hazards on, and pull off to the shoulder. My heart is racing. That was definitely a woman's voice, and she needed help. I am immediately torn between wanting to help a woman in trouble and my early formed instinct shouting at me that this is really dangerous. Just as I am trying to decide what to do and if I actually heard someone calling for help, a woman comes stumbling through the shrubs, down from the dike trails that parallel the road. Thankfully, the only street light on this road was working, so I could take into the woman's appearance immediately, even if she didn't come from the dike's entrance, but from the shrubs and trees a few feet away from it. This woman is maybe in her late 40s to early 50s, wearing a pair of denim shorts, a tank top, and flip-flops. She hurriedly walks over to my car, which I'm still in with the windows down, and is thanking me for stopping and saying that I needed to come with her. So, while I am obviously concerned, an immediate warning bell goes off when she says this. She wants me to go with her, this random lady who emerged from the pitch-black shrubs to walk back into dark shrubs along the dike where nobody can see us. Immediately, no. While she seems panicked, she seems more concerned about getting me to go with her than telling me what's actually wrong. Finally, I got it out of her that she and her friend, male, no idea of age, rode their bikes to a spot on the dikes to go swimming for a cool-off, but he hit his head. Now, the dikes are very popular for walking and biking during the day, but I can't imagine they're a great hangout spot at night, as there are tons of mosquitoes in that water, tons of bears and coyotes, and unless you're lighting an illegal campfire, the only light you'd have is the stars. But also, when I asked her whereabouts he was located, she just pointed to the eastern part of the trail. When I pushed to ask how far down the trail or if he was on the bank of the dike, she would deflect and say I need to come with her. She also wouldn't clarify if he hit his head while swimming or if he fell off his bike. Eventually, she got frustrated with me asking these questions, and she tried to grab my wrist to get me to come with her. I recoil and she tries again, and I back away from her, while firmly stating that I wasn't going into the dark with her, but I will call an ambulance. She didn't have a phone. It's probably worth mentioning that I suggested calling an ambulance right away, but she said no, that I needed to go with her before launching into her story. She seemed very upset by this, but I called anyways. I called emergency services and gave the dispatcher my location, and I was doing my best to explain the situation to the police dispatcher. She took my phone from me and started hurriedly repeating the same vague story to the dispatcher. I am still super on edge and a bit surprised that she just took my phone out of my hand mid-sentence, but also trying to be understanding that there is a real possibility that her friend is seriously hurt. While she's speaking with the police dispatcher, I watch as she walks out of earshot with me. And I realize she's not wet. Didn't she say she just went swimming? Her hair was dry and her clothes were completely dry too. And where was her bike? If he was way down the trail, wouldn't getting on the bike to find help be faster? Thankfully, a truck with company decals was making its way around the corner, and I waved it down, just hoping somebody could help me with this situation, as my observations of the woman were making me more nervous. The driver, probably around 30 male, pulls over, and I ask him if he wouldn't mind waiting with me until the ambulance arrives. He looked like he was getting off a construction-like night shift, so I felt bad, but he agreed he would stay, stating that he was a little suspicious of the situation. I am not really sure why I felt that way, as I hadn't told him about anything she'd done or said yet, but after telling him the whole story, he agreed that it was weird and thought that she might run off with my phone because of how far away she was talking to the dispatcher. The woman hangs up and walks the phone back to me and once again tries to get us both to go with her. The truck driver tells her it's probably best to wait for the ambulance because if they show up and she's not here, they won't know where to go on the trail. Again, I really don't want to read into how she was acting too much because she could be genuinely worried and scared for her friend, but she seemed more frustrated by us than worried now. And she wouldn't respond to any questions that the truck driver was asking about her friend or what happened. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived and 2 paramedics got out. The woman starts walking towards the entrance path to the dike without even saying anything to the paramedics or responding to their questions about where her friend is. They all disappear into the dark trail. A few minutes later, a police car and 2 officers pull up, and I told them they went east on the trail and the officers followed. The truck driver and I waited around for 10 minutes to see if the police needed to talk to us and to see if her friend was okay. But when nobody emerged from the trail, we figured the police could contact me if they needed to and decided to leave. I thanked the truck driver for stopping to assist me and we parted ways. I was still shaking as I got in my car and drove the rest of the way home, replaying the whole thing in my head. Was I overreacting, or was that actually weird? I never did get a call from the police to follow up about anything, and I never knew what happened to the woman and her friend. I tried searching local news for any info. If her friend was really hurt, I hope he is okay and made a full recovery. But it's been 3 years, and when I think back to that moment, I still get that sinking feeling in my stomach. Something just didn't add up about that situation. Like too many odd details that weren't fitting in the picture right. I can't seem to shake the feeling that something more sinister waited for me in the darkness of that trail. Yep, you read the title right. I, now 20 female, was 13 at the time this story takes place. It was the summer between 7th and 8th grade for me, which would make the year 2016, and I had just moved to a new city about an hour away from where I grew up. To help me make friends before the school year started, my mom signed me up for a day camp in the new town over the summer. At this camp, I actually did develop a small friend group, but the only one that matters to the story would be Jay, 14 male. If I'm going to be honest, Jay was always more flirty with me than I was comfortable with, and I expressed that several times, but I always tried to minimize confrontation when I did so. Hindsight is 20/20, right? I should have cut the friendship when it was clear that he wasn't respecting my boundaries, but damn, I was a lonely kid and all my other new friends acted like it was normal. Well, one day the rest of the friend group wasn't there. One was sick and the other 2 were siblings whose family had taken a day trip, and Jay and I were hanging out alone in the gym. We were sitting off the side talking, but the gym was full of other kids and counselors. He said he had a secret to tell me and asked me to lean closer. As soon as I did, he grabbed me, pushed me down on the ground, and tried to get on top of me. In front of the whole gym, he was trying to kiss me, while also trying to use the hand he wasn't holding me down with to fiddle with the button of my pants. I yelled at him to stop, to get off of me. No, thrashed around and made it as difficult for him as possible to do what he was attempting to do, but he wouldn't stop. None of the counselors gave me a second look. I thought that in a room full of people, nobody was going to stop him, and I knew that if somebody didn't, he was going to fully overpower me and follow through. I was still trying to fight him off when a group of 4 or 5 kids from the younger group, who had previously been playing badminton, saw what was going on and decided to take it into their own hands since nobody else was going to help me. I want to stress to you guys that these kids were from the ages of 6 to 9. None of them looked older than 8 though. But these kids brought their little rackets with them and rallied around me. I heard a little chorus of voices yelling, "Get off of her. Stop it, you butthead." And one prominent. She said no, while I watched 2 rackets slide between our faces. They were trying to pry his face off of my face. The other kids took their rackets and just went ham on Jay, hitting the crap out of him. At first he was so focused on his goal that he just swatted them, hitting the kids back and continuing to try to force himself on me. But these kids were not letting up, and the combination of me thrashing and the kids hitting him was making this a lot harder than he thought it would be. So after a few minutes of this, Jay decided it simply wasn't worth it anymore, got off me and walked away. I still think about this a lot. It was very traumatic for me. Not only did a friend try to do that to me, but the adults in the room that were supposed to protect me completely ignored a blatant essay attempt. It's sick to think that these young kids cared about my autonomy more than the adults. But at the same time, it gives me a little bit of hope for the future to know that the younger kids of this generation are being taught to care about others in this way. The kids now would be about the age I was when it happened, and I wonder about how they're doing all the time. I wonder if they ever think about what they did for me that day, and I hope they know how grateful I am. I can't say I'm glad that this happened by any means, but in a way I am grateful that it gave me the opportunity to see the next generation in action and boost my faith in humanity. Another story from rehab slash mental health facility over 10 years ago now. Full disclosure, I don't think this is anything other than a bunch of crazy coincidences in a setting that made it more weird, but I will definitely never forget it. When I was depressed, one of the things I'd have a lot of issues with was my dreams. I would often have very intense, vivid dream one night, and then the next night it picked up where it left off. This went on for months. The dreams had a lot of imagery related to my family and country of origin during World War II. I believe they meant something. The only people who knew about this dream fascination were my husband and my therapist. So to the hospital. There was one guy there, we'll call him Dave, who had schizophrenia. He was kind, honest, interesting, and very talkative. Unfortunately, he would go into these deep conspiracy wormholes, and he really just could not be completely confused and tune out after a while. Most people just walked away from him. Anyways, I told Dave outright that I usually got lost and tuned out, but if he wanted to just talk at me rather than to me, that's fine, so he did that. One evening, I felt particularly shitty and sat inside to draw alone. He came to sit with me, and I said, "Sorry, mate, not this evening." And he understood. But he said, "You know, very few people have been in the room with the Mona Lisa, and people who have are changed forever. They see things others don't see." And then he walked away. What he didn't know is that I am one such person. Long story short, I got the Louvre on closing and begged the ticket person to let me in. As I got to the room Mona Lisa was in, security was ushering people out to exits, so I went in there alone. And yes, I never thought a painting could be special, but there was something eerie about being alone with it. As you would imagine, this random but oddly specific comment from my friend Dave creeped me out a little bit. He came back about 15 minutes later as I was getting ready to go up to my room. He handed me a folded piece of paper and said, "You don't have to read it now. It's just something I think you should look into." And then he left. So I stuffed it into my drawing pad and went upstairs. In my room, my husband rang me excited. He'd been watching a documentary about genetic memories coming through dreams. And it was about some women in different countries, treated by two different psychiatrists who had vivid dreams they were cathars, a medieval religious sect. He told me all about this phenomenon and the possibility that we could inherit memories through inherited DNA. Some kind of genetic testing showed the women were related to each other and also likely descendants of the cathars. Well, I thought that was pretty cool, and being unwell, I felt validated that my dreams might actually mean something, that they were inherited memories from my grandparents. In any case, we say goodnight, and I get ready to sleep. I go to move my drawing pad off the bed, and the paper Dave gave me half an hour earlier slips out onto the floor. I pick it up and open it to see what's written inside. The cathars. Keep in mind there was no TV in the facility, and anyways, I could see Dave outside through the glass the whole time I was in the dining room drawing. It was about an hour and a half. He couldn't go upstairs without walking past me. There's little to no probability that he'd been watching the same doco as my husband. He just, well, I don't know. It truly freaked me out at the time. I don't think he could read my mind or was psychic. I just wondered if his mental illness gave him some kind of insight that is often mistaken for delusion. Perhaps I still do in some ways. When I left the hospital, Dave had my number, but I didn't hear from him for months. But one evening, I and my now ex-husband were talking about this cathars incident for the first time since I got home, and how bizarre and unexplainable it seemed to be. And then my phone rang. It was Dave. I don't know where he is now, and this was a long time ago. I sometimes wish I did, and I hope he's doing okay.